today, as played out in VR and AR, and the monetization of it. Thomas presented the perfect person. Thomas, and you can tell us a little bit more about what your functions are, but Thomas transitioned from publishing to music to Warner Brothers, where he runs all the digital strategy and is also the lead person involved with the incorporation and the merger to AT&T. So he brings a very particularly expert vantage to how studios are thinking about monetizing their massive IP and can offer sort of the other side of the perspective about Ready Player One and all the other projects.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do, for starters, at Warner Brothers and how this pertains to VR and AR?
Sure. So I'm the Chief Digital Officer for Warner Brothers, and I oversee our technology groups, and I oversee our corporate strategy and business development and M&A functions. And really my role ends up being kind of as a connector across all the different departments of the company, kind of horizontally. Digital has become something that is sort of diffused into every part of our business, every part of our supply chain, and every aspect of how we make content across our entire production landscape, which is film and television and video games. And VR and AR increasingly is becoming something very similar in the sense that it is a incredibly interesting, provocative, fascinating new medium and technology. It can be implemented in many, many different ways. It's certainly being explored very deeply by our marketing and promotional departments, by every one of our content divisions, and I think it really seizes the imagination of our talent, who look at it and see tremendous potential and lots and lots of ideas about how to work with it. And we spend a lot of time thinking sort of at the corporate level, but also across all of our distribution divisions about what the business model is, how it's evolving, and we really see the marketplace as being at a really interesting point, kind of an inflection point where there's just tremendously great technology out there. We're beginning to see what the commercial opportunities might be, but it's still pretty nascent as a business in many ways.
Zach, if we can launch, you recently adapted Bernie Klein's New York Times bestselling novel, Ready Player One, and moved to London to live on the set as Spielberg was directing it with your family. Can you tell us about the movie and cracking the story for film?
Sure. Let me start with some spoilers. Here's how it ends. I mean, I can tell you, I obviously am not, I can't tell you anything that I would be hunted down for involving the actual story, but obviously, I mean, the book is about what we're all discussing here. It's about, it's set in a world in which there is a completely VR environment, and so a lot of our job, and Frank and Stephen and I and Ernie and a bunch of other people have been working. It's now been about 3 years straight that we've been working on this. A lot of what we have to do is sit around and figure out, oh, what are the next things? I mean, I guess Everest, it was interesting that there was a picture of Everest up there, that's all I'll say, just because it's something that we talked about, what kind of experiences you would have in the Oasis. The thing that's interesting about that we've discussed is that the techniques used to make the film involve virtual reality. I mean, tremendously. Stephen scouted sets in virtual reality. We would go down to Digital Domain, he'd put on his VR headset and look at the set that they were constructing. Not only the digital sets, where he'd look around and say, okay, well, we need more of this, we need more of that, but even the actual physical sets that we're building, they created a digital analog so he could walk around and say, that bridge is going to block my shot of this. Can we fly that out, and can we instead put the staircase over there? So there's all these surreal moments in the making of it where, the making of the movie was, sometimes people would be like, do you think this is really going to happen? I'm like, it's happening. We're using a version of the Oasis to make this movie right now, whether you know it or not. There's also a number of really confusing conversations where people were like, well, how would they know this in the Oasis, like this plot point? I'm like, well, see what we're doing here right now? All this information is stored in those computers right over there. So theoretically accessible. So, I mean, for those of you who don't know, for motion capture, it's basically a volume like this, which has cameras all over the place, capturing everything that's happening from every possible perspective, and your actors perform in this virtual space. Afterwards, Steven Spielberg can go back and change the shots and change what he does. He shoots it and usually knows what he wants, but afterwards he can go into what's called the VCam tent, the virtual cam tent, and basically reshoot the scene in virtual reality, either wearing a headset or looking at a monitor, and he literally holds a virtual camera which has been designed to feel like a real camera so that it operates properly, even though, if you understand what I'm saying, that the thing he's holding in his hand doesn't do anything. It's just a monitor and a handle, but it's weighted so that he feels like he's operating a camera in the virtual world. So it's surreal.
How would you say that shooting with virtual camera technology changes stakes and the process of storytelling?
Well, it's a tremendous tool. It basically allows you, it just gives you more control over what you can do. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, because you could get the same effect with CGI. I mean, let's say I wanted to do something where we're all sitting in this room and, a meteor crashes through the ceiling and hits a bunch of people. Well, obviously, I mean, there's an app for that. J.J. Abrams invented an app for that. You can get action effects. Or you could get ILM to spend millions of dollars and man hours to actually animate a great version of that that looks totally realistic. The advantage of motion capture is we shoot everybody in the room in their mocap suits, or some of you in the room. You shoot it in the volume. You have that existing footage, and it's a lot easier to, the stuntmen do what they're supposed to do, and you shoot some of it practically, and then you only have to animate the meteor part. So, that's not the best example in the world, but there's a lot of shortcutting of what you're doing. And it also allows you, look, one of the hardest things when you're making a movie, unless you're Steven Spielberg, ironically, is figuring out what angle to shoot from and how the shot should be composed and all those, what the lighting should be. And you can completely change all that when you're shooting in a volume and doing motion capture. You can decide out.
Obviously, and this being a meta example, there's so many philosophical questions about, you take a book that's changed to a movie that is about the nature of experience, and we are approaching, or either at or approaching a point of technology where we can deliver a simulacrum of experience that is so dead on to our own as to almost be indistinguishable. From your vantage of sitting of it on the studio side, what feels like the biggest opportunity?
Well, I think we look at the technology and exactly the effect it has, the emotional effect it has on people, and we see it as a huge opportunity to expand the definition of what entertainment is, to really to pioneer new ways of storytelling. When you step back and if you've ever experienced any of the demos, I'm sure everyone in the room has, and you look at what the previous speaker was showing on the screen, the fact is that VR technology allows an incredible sense of illusion. You're able to really fundamentally activate core emotions in the audience and the viewer. You can make people feel thrilled or scared or excited. You can have the experience of walking across what appears to be a chasm, and you intellectually know that the ground beneath your feet is solid, but your brain is telling you, sort of stay away, or I'm scared of falling. And the fact that you can cause that emotional reaction in a person, I think, is at the fundamental core of why VR is interesting as an entertainment experience. And with AR, of course, it's different, and in some ways much more expansive because you've got the entire world to play with, and you can turn any experience, any activity in life, a wedding, this conversation in this room, anything in principle can be an entertainment experience or an activity or an augmented experience. I think that we look at that as in one way, a tremendous expansion and freeing of what's possible in terms of the kinds of experiences you can design for consumers. And we see an incredible platform for IP. If you imagine, we are in the business of the wizarding world of Harry Potter, and we have IP and franchises like DC Comics, and you can imagine how rich and deep those creative universes are, and how exciting it would be to let consumers and fans live in those universes, either as a VR experience or even perhaps more compellingly as an augmented reality experience. The big unsolved problem that we see is that at the moment it's very hard to understand how to make storytelling work in those environments. And we were having a really interesting conversation about that right before this. And we see the technology as being incredibly powerful, the potential as being very, very high. At the same time, it can be challenging to bring the consumer into a long-lasting, repeatable, sort of continuously enjoyable and clear narrative experience. It presents some of the same problems that you see in open-world video games, and there are lots of interesting kinds of solutions. I think we're seeing incredible amounts of creativity being across the sort of the universe of filmmakers and writer-producers and talent being expressed and trying to solve that problem. But we're also at the very, very early stages. I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff still to come.
Zach, as somebody who's been an ardent gamer for forever, and who's also just been through the process of making this movie, can you comment on what you feel between gaming and traditional